My husband slept with my sister, and now my sister want to marry him. I don't know how I got here, sitting in my living room, staring blankly at the wall while my world crumbles around me. My husband, the man I trusted with my life, my future, my heart, slept with my sister, and now she has the audacity to say she wants to marry him. It sounds absurd even saying it out loud, but this is my life now, an unraveling mess that I never saw coming. It all started a few months ago, though looking back now, I guess the signs were there long before I was willing to admit it. My husband and I had been going through a rough patch. We'd been married for 7 years, and while everything seemed fine on the surface, I could feel the cracks forming beneath. He had been distant lately, emotionally withdrawn, and we hadn't been as close as we used to be. I blamed it on the usual: stress, work, the demands of everyday life. We weren't arguing or anything, but there was a sense of growing disconnect between us, something that kept pushing us apart. My sister, on the other hand, was always around. She was going through a breakup at the time, and I thought she needed support. She was my little sister after all, and we've always been close. Or so I thought. She'd come over often, sometimes unannounced, to hang out, talk about her problems, or have dinner with us. At first, I was happy to be there for her. I didn't mind her dropping by all the time, and my husband seemed supportive of her too. He'd always been kind to her, treated her like family, which was how it should be, right? But as the weeks went by, I started noticing little things I couldn't quite explain. The way they'd laugh together at jokes I didn't understand, the lingering glances between them when they thought I wasn't looking, how she started texting him, at first about relationship advice, or so she claimed. I brushed it off because I didn't want to be the paranoid wife. I didn't want to believe that anything was happening between them. After all, who would? This was my sister, my blood. She wouldn't betray me like that, right? Then one night, everything fell apart. My husband had been acting strange all week, quiet, tense, like he was carrying some heavy weight. I thought maybe it was work, so I didn't push him. But that night, I woke up to find him missing from our bed. I assumed he was downstairs or something, but when I went to check, he wasn't in the house at all. His car was gone. I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. I didn't panic at first. I figured he might have just needed some air, maybe gone for a drive to clear his head. But something gnawed at me, this unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach that something was terribly wrong. That's when I got a text from my sister. It was late, way too late for her to be messaging me about anything casual. The message was simple, almost cryptic. "We need to talk." I stared at the words, my heart pounding. It didn't make sense. What could she possibly want to talk about at this hour? And why did I have this sinking feeling that whatever it was, it would shatter everything? I called her, but she didn't pick up. Instead, I decided to drive over to her apartment, thinking maybe she needed me. Maybe something had happened with her ex, and she was in trouble. I was her big sister after all. I'd always been there for her. When I pulled up to her place, I saw it. My husband's car parked out front. My hands were shaking as I got out of the car. A million thoughts raced through my mind, but none of them prepared me for what I was about to discover. I knocked on her door, hoping, praying, that this was some kind of misunderstanding. But when the door opened and I saw the look on her face, I knew. I knew immediately. My husband was there, standing in the living room behind her, looking like a deer caught in the headlights. They didn't say anything at first, and neither did I. I just stood there, frozen, as the reality of what had been happening washed over me like a tidal wave. I couldn't believe it. The two people I trusted most in the world had betrayed me. My husband, the father of our children, and my sister, who I had always been so close to, had been sleeping together. I wanted to scream, to hit something, to demand answers, but all I could manage to say was, "How long?" My sister was the one who spoke first. "It just happened," she said, her voice shaking. "We didn't mean for it to, but it just happened." I looked at my husband, waiting for him to say something, anything, but he didn't. He just stood there, staring at the floor, unable to meet my eyes. That's when I realized he wasn't sorry. He wasn't apologetic. He wasn't even trying to fix this. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I forced them back. I wasn't going to break down in front of them, not yet. I needed answers. I needed to understand how this had happened. Why this had happened. Was it just once? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My sister hesitated before shaking her head. No, it wasn't just once. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. They had been carrying on this affair for God knows how long, right under my nose, while I was busy playing the role of the supportive wife and sister. I had been blind, completely and utterly blind. But the worst part, the part that still makes my blood boil to this day, she didn't apologize. Not really. Instead, she dropped a bomb that blew apart what little was left of my sanity. "I'm in love with him," she said, looking me straight in the eye. "I want to marry him." It was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My sister, the same sister I had grown up with, shared secrets with, protected, was now telling me she wanted to marry my husband. The audacity, the selfishness of it, left me speechless. I turned to my husband, hoping, begging him to say something that would make this nightmare stop. But he just stood there, looking conflicted, like he didn't know what to do or say. And that's when I realized he hadn't made a decision yet. He was torn between us, as if there was even a choice to be made. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing as I tried to process everything that had just happened. My husband had cheated on me with my sister, and now she wanted to marry him. How could things have gotten this far without me noticing? How could I have been so blind to the lies, the betrayal, the deceit? Over the next few days, the silence in our house was deafening. My husband and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was tense, filled with accusations and hurt. I kept replaying that moment in my head, the way she had looked at me, the nerve of her to think she could take him from me and marry him. It was like I was living in some twisted soap opera. Only this was real. This was my life. But here's the thing. As angry as I was at both of them, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal from my husband more than anyone. He was supposed to be my partner, my teammate, the person who had vowed to love and cherish me. Yet he had broken that vow in the worst possible way. And now he was standing at a crossroads, unsure of whether to stay with me or leave for her. The fact that he hadn't already made up his mind said everything. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between us only grew. My sister, meanwhile, was relentless. She kept texting him, calling him, trying to convince him that they were meant to be together, that they could build a life together. And every time I saw her name flash on his phone, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if my marriage could survive this, or if I even wanted it to survive. All I knew was that the two people I had loved and trusted most in the world had betrayed me, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life.